This is your tropical weather update from 28storms.com on this Wednesday, June 8th, 2011. The National Hurricane Center is no longer highlighting any areas in their latest tropical weather outlook. For the past several days, we've been monitoring 94L Invest, which was located in the central and western Caribbean, but the chances of tropical development over the next 48 hours have decreased so significantly that the Hurricane Center is no longer mentioning that in their public outlook. This was their latest service map that was produced earlier this morning, and it's fairly tranquil out there, although they do still initialize that weak 1008 millibar low just to the west of Jamaica. The latest overall Atlantic satellite imagery shows a rather tranquil and rather unfavorable pattern for tropical development. We no longer have any substantial convection over the central and western Caribbean. We still have a weak low-level circulation that's highly exposed over to the west of Kingston, with all of the convection that was originally over the Caribbean being shunted out to sea by this very strong and unfavorable upper level trough that's been generating high levels of wind shear across much of the greater Antilles. The only somewhat negative aspect of the satellite over the Caribbean today is that we still have a fetch of moisture draped across much of Hispaniola, including Haiti. And if you've seen the news reports from yesterday, we have as many as 23 fatalities occurring in Haiti over the past week due to the torrential rainfall associated with 94L Invest, which was that tropical system that we've been monitoring for the past week or so. And it looks like the chances of rain are going to remain higher than average over the next 48 hours. This is the latest water vapor imagery, and once again, this simply just shows the type of pattern that we're dealing with, and it's fairly unfavorable. We have strong troughiness over the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf is fairly basically shut down over the next week or so for any type of tropical development. And there's really no organized tropical systems left in the Caribbean, as this big upper level trough has carved out much of the basin. This is the latest wind shear analysis from the Sims website, and as you can see, there's really no discernible areas of very favorable upper level winds. Much of the basin is experiencing moderate to high wind shear, with only a couple little minor pockets of lower winds aloft. And again, in these areas, we really don't have any organized tropical systems at this time. This is the latest Canadian CMC sea level pressure forecast for the next week. As you can see, the model is really not doing all that much in the tropics. It shows our weak area of low pressure beginning to move into Florida, perhaps too strong in this model. And as we've seen in the satellite imagery, much of the convection associated with this system has already been blown off into the Atlantic. So it looks like this will not be providing Florida with the much needed rainfall that the state deserves, and the rest of the Atlantic looks fairly quiet. The latest GFS forecast is much of the same. It takes the low pressure toward the north, and a secondary new low begins to develop over the southwest Atlantic, although it's more than likely overdone in the model, and I'm really not concerned at all about any chance of tropical development in the southwest Atlantic over the next week or so. At most, South Florida and the Bahamas can expect perhaps slightly elevated rain chances over the next 48 to 72 hours, but certainly no significant rainfall and not enough to cancel any activities in this region. The latest no gaps run is in very good agreement with the latest Canadian and GFS. We see our original tropical low just to the south of Cuba, and as this advances, it begins to also develop that second low over the Bahamas, possibly providing some moderate rainfall for a brief period of time before it begins to lift toward the north. Again, I really don't foresee any type of tropical development in the southwest Atlantic. And as we go into the future, even more so, we begin to see possibly a weak tropical wave trying to exit the intertropical convergence zone, but really nothing all that impressive, and it's fairly early in the year to be looking at any type of tropical development that far out in the central Atlantic Ocean. The UK Met also does not show much in the way of any tropical organization over the next 72 hours. This is the current time. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. The only real low-pressure system on the map is the low that we've been monitoring, and it ever so slowly begins to move towards southern Florida as of 72 hours as a very weak and pitiful-looking tropical low-pressure area. The latest European ECMWF model solution is also rather bland today. Doesn't really show much through the period. This is the current time. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, Day 4. Any remnants of the low that was over the Caribbean is now beginning to move closer to Bermuda. It's actually going to be between Bermuda and the Carolinas, and by Day 5 you really don't see much out there at all as of this current model solution. Things are a lot different in the eastern Pacific, however, where we already have Tropical Storm Adrian. The latest visible imagery shows that it's beginning to develop a distinct eye-looking feature, and it will more than likely be upgraded to a hurricane in the very imminent future. This is the latest infrared image, and as you can see, the storm is becoming increasingly organized, with convection beginning to wrap around all quadrants of the storm. And the latest water vapor floater imagery shows a fairly favorable pattern. We see increasing outflow in all quadrants, and we do see some dry air surrounding the storm, but as long as the wind shear remains weak, the dry air will not be able to entrain into the low-level circulation that well. As stated before, Adrian will become a hurricane in the very near future, as forecast by the National Hurricane Center. But the good news is that the storm is expected to remain off the coast of Mexico. The only reason why a tropical storm watch has been issued for portions of the coast is that there's a slight chance that they will see tropical storm force winds. As the storm remains on this track, it'll be just close enough for some of these locations to possibly pick up some weak tropical storm force conditions. The latest model consensus is in agreement with the Hurricane Center on keeping this storm off the coast of Mexico, although we do have a couple model outliers that do want to turn the system more toward the north, and as always, we'll continue to take a look at that over the coming hours and days. So that's all for now. Check back soon for more updates from 28storms.com.